God, I love this show. I love this job.
Gets bigger and bigger every year.
We're gonna rock the boat.
And that's my final judgment.
What does the ideal body look like around the world?
It's pop trigger time!
Yes!
Hi, Jeffrey.
Welcome to what, the flick?
I finished watching it and I thought, oh, that was nice.
Welcome to Nerd Alert at CES.
Welcome back to another FIFA What If Challenge.
We want to completely revitalize the Democratic Party and make it a party of the people.
What's happening to millennials, the demographic that's most impacted by this?
Yeah!
TYT! TYT! TYT!
We're not the Young Turks, you're the Young Turks.
Have a seat.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. We're not Google, you're Google.
So tell me, you just shared a story with me, like when you flew in here to Chicago. How big is TYT? 5 billion views. We've just seen it.
Yeah, so it's one thing to see the numbers and people throw around numbers, et cetera. It's another thing to see it in real life. So this morning I'm getting a cab from the hotel to come here, and the guy getting the cab says to me, "Oh my God, I just saw you this morning. I was just watching you." And he said, "This is like out of a movie." But what's the cooler part of that story is that he then explained to me that he was making breakfast for his son, and that they now have a morning ritual where they flip around YouTube and they watch it together. So it's a whole new world. In the old days, that would have been local news, or that would have been Good Morning America. Now they probably don't even know what that is. I mean, and it used to be people under the age of 25 had no idea, about old media. Now I think it's under the age of 35 have no idea. I mean, when I go to talk to young audiences and I ask them, does anyone know who's the primetime news anchor of ABC, CBS, or NBC? None of them know. None of them.
Yeah. Today we want to talk a bit about your history, who you are, so that people get an idea what formed you. And then we want to talk a bit about the Young Turks, who the Young Turks are, what defines you really as a news program. And also in particular about the change we're seeing in the news landscape, in the media landscape in general, fueled by technology, and particularly internet. And in the end, a bit of the current landscape we're seeing with the elections.
Yep.
Cool?
Yeah.
So Cenk, I did a bit of research, and obviously Wikipedia, a very trusted source of everyone in the millennial landscape here. You moved to the US with your parents when you were 8.
That's right.
Can you tell us a bit of your background?
Sure.
Yeah.
So we're in the best of times, we're in the worst of times. And the worst of times is easy to see. You see the terrorism, you see Donald Trump. But we forget the best of times. So let me give you some context there. In 1820, the average life expectancy was 35 years old. So I'd have been long dead by now. And that's 1820 is not that long ago. So just a couple hundred years. And the reason I bring that up is because my dad grew up as an olive farmer in southeastern Turkey. And one of the revolutions people don't talk about is public education. So he wound up getting public education all the way through college. He earned his way and got a free public education in Istanbul and became a mechanical engineer. And otherwise, we'd have never gotten off that farm. Right now, I'd be an olive farmer in southeastern Turkey getting shelled by ISIS. So we have made a tremendous amount of progress. And then, so my dad got to build a business in Turkey. He sold it, he came here. And I remember when I came here and I was 8 years old, because I'd lived in a big city in Istanbul, lots of concrete, tall buildings. And then we moved to the suburbs of New Jersey, and I thought that was nirvana. I was like, oh my God, look at this utopia called New Jersey. And there's grass everywhere. I'm like, this giant house. I'm like, how many families are living here? They're like, no, just us. I'm like, this is amazing. I love America. So that's how we came over. And then I wound up getting a decent education, and off we go. And so all that was made possible by that earlier revolution.
Okay. And yeah, you are very liberal, like center to very to the left. But I also heard that you have been quite conservative in the past. What has really changed you?
Yeah, so it's two things have changed. Some of my views have changed a little bit, but I think that actually Washington has changed more. I think a lot of my views are similar to what they were when I was growing up as a so-called liberal Republican in New Jersey. Of course, that just doesn't exist anymore. There are no liberal Republicans left, but there were when I was growing up. And so, I'm considered way left, I guess, in America. I bet in Europe I'd be considered right down the middle. Like, I look at Jeremy Corbyn and I like his revolution. I look at some of his views and I go, ooh, that's a little left. That's a little left, right? I'm going to do a town hall at YouTube Space LA this Friday with Jill Stein. And John Oliver just quoted one of my earlier interviews with her in his show on Sunday. And in that section, we're talking about how, she's going to get rid of all student debt. And I was like, it's a little left. It's a little left. So what changed? One, my eyes got open to the marketing of the Republicans. They're great at marketing. But so they'll say, okay, we want to balance the budget. Really? You got a funny way of showing it. Right? The last Republican president to leave office with a balanced budget was Dwight Eisenhower, who, by the way, now would be too liberal for the Democratic Party. So the entire spectrum has changed. They're like, oh my God, we hate amnesty. Who did amnesty? Ronald Reagan. Flat out amnesty, right? And so I think there's some chance that Reagan, in some of his positions, would be considered too liberal for the Democrats, let alone the Republicans. So there's this massive rightward shift, but in the political landscape in Washington, not in the country. If you do polling in the country, America is solidly progressive on almost every single issue. Immigration, taxes, Social Security, you name it. And then, of course, the Iraq War. Al Gore was the first Democrat I ever voted for. I watched the debates. I have eyes. And I was like, the one guy is way smarter than the other guy. And then once Bush got in office and he's like, oh, we're going to Iraq. I'm like, what? I don't get it. They didn't attack us. Like, why are people missing the big picture of they did not attack us? And so I was off that crazy train at that point. And then they started torturing people. And that's not what I signed up for. So that was a super easy decision by that time.
Okay. Let's switch gears a bit and talk about the Young Turks. So it started out as a radio show, and now you're at a stage where you have 5 billion, right?
That's right.
5 billion views and 8 million subscribers across the network. Can you tell us what really the step was from a radio show to actually an online video show?
So there's a couple aspects to that. First, I always wanted to do online video, even way before I started the radio show. So back in '98, I wrote an email to my friends and I said, it's online video is going to take off and it is going to merge/replace TV. And they're like, oh, you're crazy. That'll never happen. And I'm like, no, I'm positive it's going to happen. And so at the time that we started the Young Turks, it was 2002, we were as leading edge as we could be within our resources. So we were the first original talk show for Sirius satellite radio. So we started that in my living room because I had no resources. We were in a one-bedroom apartment off of Sunset in LA, and we bought a couple of mics and a radio thing and got going. And then at the end of '05, I'm at a diner with a friend of mine, Jim Gilliam, who's a genius guy, eventually started Nation Builder. And I say, look, Jim, I've been wanting to do online video for, since back in '98, way before I started the Young Turks. He said, oh, okay, great, let's do it tomorrow. And I said, what do you mean, let's do it tomorrow? He's like, I know how to do it. He's like, you buy the cameras, I'll come set it up. And we did. And we're like, okay. And Jim's like, I love giving you advice. You're the only one who actually acts on it. Like, people say they want advice, they don't want advice, right? They just want affirmation, right? I'm like, no, that's a good idea. I'm doing it right now. So we didn't know what we're doing. We got a little place on Wilshire. It was an office building. We didn't know you needed high ceilings. We didn't know anything about lighting. So we got this tiny little office, and we put a wooden table in the front, giant radio microphones that covered up our face, and we got started. The lights in our head, and then you know what happened? One, YouTube happened, and two, the audience happened. So it was not just that we gained the audience, It was that the audience, that's why I said it in that video, we're not the Young Turks, they're the Young Turks. We formed a symbiotic relationship where they were part of the show. First suggestion they had for us was, move the goddamn mics, okay? They're like, we don't care about you and Ben, but Jill is gorgeous, and move the mic, right? And so, and then they would literally send in, hey, this is the lav mic you need to buy, it goes on your jacket, and here are the specs on it. Some other guy came in and with a TriCaster, like an old school TriCaster he's like, here, just take it. Okay. And we're like, oh, that's awesome. Now we can switch the cameras. Okay, it doesn't have to be one camera. And so we just built it together with the audience. And so, and I think even more to the central point of your question, we gave them an alternative. And when we were on the radio, but also in online video, people would most often say to us in the YouTube comments and the emails, later in Twitter, you were a voice in the wilderness, right? I thought I was alone. And there was a mom in North Carolina who would put her kid in the car and drive around and around and around to listen to us back when we were on the radio. Because she's like, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'm like, that's right. That's why there's no one else saying that. That's right, right? Yeah. And so one part of it was that nobody was doing anything that was progressive, which is, like, if you just look at it from a business perspective, that's mental. You're leaving 50%, I would argue 60%, of the market completely untapped. What kind of business people are you, right?
Why do you think that is actually the case?
Which leads to the second point, which gets to your question. I think that even the bigger part of it is not so much that we're progressive, but that we were doing it from an outsider perspective, and almost everyone else was doing it from an insider perspective. News. So they have the big shiny studios and CNN, and they have all these people who worked in government and was a spokesperson for this and the spokesperson for that. That's not the answer, that's the problem. So you're giving everybody an insider perspective, and the guy sitting at home in Wichita, he's not an insider, he's an outsider. He's part of the Rebel Alliance. He doesn't want to be part of your Death Star, right? So
Love it.
That actually gives us 98% of the audience, and I'm being kind to them, leaving them 2%. So I think that's what resonated, and the reason why no one else does it is because in the old days, if you wanted to set up a media company, especially in television, you needed to be a multi-billion-dollar company. You needed all that infrastructure, you needed distribution, you needed to buy your way into it. And when you're a multi-billion-dollar company, you ain't the Rebel Alliance, you're the Death Star, right? And so luckily the internet has changed that dynamic completely because it has now empowered many Rebel Alliances and flipped the paradigm. But for old media, they couldn't get out of their insider perspective because it just trickled down from the top all the way down to the anchors. Those what I call news, not news anchors, but news actors. They're hired to read a script pre-approved by, and it comes all the way down from management. Not that the management writes their scripts, though it doesn't work that way. But management hires the producers, who hires the anchors, who all have the same perspective. So that's why they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it even if they wanted to.
Yeah, and for people who don't know the Young Turks, like for me, example, like I moved to the US and really like a year ago, and that's how I came across your channel. How would you really define the Young Turks on what you do on your channel, in particular the main channel?
Yeah, and so we want to be a digital campfire for the world. So in the old days, the one good thing was we had campfires. So we had Seinfeld. Everybody would watch Seinfeld, and everybody would talk about Seinfeld. We'd have the Super Bowl. Super Bowl's still around. And we would have some news programs that everybody watched, right? And maybe Good Morning America or Today's Show, et cetera. They use these water coolers, campfires, however you want to call it. I want to recreate that for the digital age. And so I think the Young Turks is where people come to find out about the news, discuss the news, and it's not just us discussing it, which we do, but it's also in the comments. That's why we're among the top YouTube channels on number of comments per video. I think we were at 14. I think now we're at 1,600 comments per video, and the same is true across all the platforms, because that's where people gather to discuss that news. So it's about news, and I want to be the global news leader. And I think we're going to replace CNN, and I think we're going to do that, honestly, relatively easily. But it's not just about the news. It's about a discussion about what is happening in the world today. So whatever is relevant to you. So the old school way of thinking of news is, okay, hardcore politics, yada, yada. The new way of thinking about it is whatever is news to you. So whether it's entertainment, sports, or it could be as more granular too. So we want to go global, but we also want to go local.
Yeah, and I think like these big news corporations, they profit really from their access and their resources, right? But I've seen now Jill Stein, Bernie Sanders, and on your channel, you have with Jordan Sheridan, like guy outside in the field, basically. How do you see like the future playing out for TYT, especially like on that access and resources perspective?
Yeah.
Because I think that's a big.
Well, that's our biggest challenge because it's funny in the Valley, Silicon Valley, they always say, oh, they want disruptors, but when they see a real disruptor, they get a little freaked out by it, right? Like they want a disruptor that's like the same thing they've always seen. Oh, young guy out of Stanford, played in a jazz band, right? Yada, yada, right? That's not a disruptor, okay? So when we go shake their house a little bit and we say, no, we're going to pulverize the news business as you know it. This is new media, and we came up organically, and we came up with the audience, and here's our plan for having more Jordan Sheridans in the field. So that's our investigative reporter, field reporter. It's done a great job. Yesterday I was in Seattle doing a TV show, the Young Turks on Fusion. I talked to about 200 people in the audience after the show. They're like, oh, give us more of that, give us more of that. And I want to. But so when you go to some investors, it makes them a little uncomfortable. Like, oh, you're, Bernie Sanders. Ugh, he'd raise my taxes. Yeah, damn straight he would, right? And so that's a dynamic we got to deal with. It's not easy. So we have a subscription model. We have obviously ads on YouTube. We got YouTube Red. We've got ads on other platforms, and we cobble this thing together and we keep it going. But I think that in order to get those 10 reporters instead of just one and really get out there and cover things more dynamically, we're going to need more resources. And I think that if we got around the size of normal digital media companies, watch out. They'd have almost no chance of stopping us. I mean, we duct tape this thing all the way to here, right? I mean, if you guys knew how little money was in the Young Turks, it is astounding. How in the world did we beat CNN with like 3 rolls of duct tape? And so I think that if we're the most efficient company probably in digital media. And so if we got a real round, we'd clean up.
And what are your plans to do that? Like how do you break out of this like small business world and into like getting the message out further?
Yeah. So yeah, resources are real. There's 2 ways to do it, and it's a combination of that. So number one, we could do this round that I'm talking about. If you're at home, you might not know what I'm saying, but I think a lot of people in this room do. But the way that things work in new day and age is you go raise big amounts of money, and that's your resources to grow. Now, and then you get to, well, we would get to profitability. A lot of other people just exit, but that's a whole nother conversation. But we're built to last. So that allows you to build in a sustainable way. So you've got more reporters, more audience, and you create a virtuous cycle, right? And I think that, and we're just having a conversation internally over the last couple of weeks on this, and I think that somebody out there or several people out there are going to go look and go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I got to get in on that, right? Yeah. And so that will very likely happen. But the other way is just organically, like we've been doing it for 14 years and 10 years online. And so the subscription model is what allowed us to hire Jordan, which allowed us to break so many stories in this news cycle. The subscription model has allowed us to add more shows, including aggressive progressive. They thought I wasn't progressive enough, so they wanted more aggressive progressives, and we started a whole show called that. And so the more that the people pay $10 a month, the more we can give them. And that's what we do. We just take the money and we grow it, and more reporting, more shows.
Yeah, let's focus a bit more on that part, especially on the independent media part, because that's how you really differentiate yourself from CNN and MSNBC, Fox News, etc. Mm-hmm. Because you're not held, like, you don't have any huge investors that basically like tell you what to do. Mm-hmm. So from that perspective, like what do you think are the advantages, and what are you really struggling with as an independent media outlet?
Yeah. So the struggle is what you would expect. But here, let me make it real for you guys. A concrete example that gives you a sense of what it means to be at a resource disadvantage. So everybody keeps coming to us and saying, "Why aren't you guys on Snapchat?" Now, not in this building, they're not, but. Well, okay, yeah, CNN's on Snapchat, and XYZ's on Snapchat. Well, Snapchat demands original programming and it's structured to their specific platform. And I've done research, and other companies have literally 30-person teams for their Snapchats. Well, yeah, CNN can afford to throw away millions upon millions upon millions of dollars every year trying to build some sort of audience on Snapchat, which is, by the way, never going to work. It's not like which 24-year-old or 12-year-old is like, "Oh, everybody, quiet, Wolf is on." Right? So, but they can throw 30-person team at it, which is a giant amount of resources. I don't have a 30-person team. That's half my company, right? So those are, would I love to be on all those platforms? Yes, but those are the things that we got to struggle with. And they've got bureaus all over the world, and we will too, but it takes us more time to get there. But the advantage is I'm not encumbered by all of their monumental disadvantages they can't turn the damn ship. So, okay, what are their disadvantages? They're reading from a prompter. Everybody knows it. Even if they don't know it, they feel it in their gut. Like, why is that guy not talking to me like a human being? Why are they all robots? So I remember watching this local news in Louisiana when I was down there a bunch of years ago. And she talked like this, and you guys will all recognize it from local news. "The number of ambulances have doubled, but so have the number of accidents." Who talks like that? Why did they convince themselves that that's the way that a professional should talk? Maybe a professional robot, but I wouldn't have even programmed it that way, right? So they're stuck on the scripts and they can't get off of it. That's so inauthentic. You guys know that's never going to work online, right? They're stuck on access. "Oh my God, I need to get Governor Kasich on my show and Senator Bine." No, you don't. They're super boring. And the audience does not believe them, does not trust them. I remember when I was at MSNBC, one of the stylistic points they had for me was, act more like a senator. I was like, why? Why would you act more like a senator? They're the dullest people in the world. Nobody's going to watch that, right? And so when they're stuck on access, they're stuck on their insider perspective, they're stuck on their prompters, and they're like, well, okay, I finally got, and they fought me on this in the beginning at MSNBC, and they did even more so after I left. Sometimes the anchors are now allowed to take off their tie. Ooh. I mean, that's rearranging the chairs on the Titanic. So they see the iceberg. They know what their audience. You guys know, right? The average audience of the median age of the CNN viewer is 64 years old. At Fox, it's 68. At Bill O'Reilly, it's 72.
And at TYT?
At TYT, we're 70% 18 to 34-year-olds. 70%. Okay, they are doomed. They have no chance against us. You know, I don't know if you guys have read David and Goliath, the Malcolm Gladwell book, and he flips it on its head, and he's absolutely right. It's not that, oh, David the underdog beat Goliath. No, David was the favorite. He had a slingshot. He could just fire from a distance. Boom! Goliath had no chance. How the hell is he going to reach him? He's got a slingshot. It's like a gun. He's like, oh, yeah, I have a big sword. Boom, like Indiana Jones, right? So we have a slingshot called the internet. They're never going to beat us. They have no chance.
Yeah, actually, that's a good segue to my next point there. Like, we talked about now, like, how the news now, like, the media landscape has changed, and by no question, like, the internet and technology has enabled that. How do you think also the news consumption on, like, especially like the millennials has changed the consumption piece?
Yeah. So I think millennials are consuming news in a lot of different ways. So let's keep it real. They're also consuming it in small snippets. So whether it's on Facebook, Snapchat, or on YouTube. But okay, there's the memes, which please double check the memes. Okay, Memes are not journalism. Okay. And then there's some good ones out there. We review some from time to time, but that's not a thing. That's not a fact, right? If it's got and how many Republican memes have an asterisk and then a link to the article? None, right? So anyway, but then there's like the quick 30-second thing. Hey, here's what happened today. Nothing wrong with that. That's the way that people consume news. And then if they want a little bit of analysis, they come to us, or commentary, or just really, as I said before, a discussion. And it's as old as time. When I was growing up, I used to listen to Howard Stern, it's in the morning, right? It's in the radio in the morning. I already know the news. I was a kid who cared about the world, so I had already listened to Peter Jennings, and I knew what the news was. I went to Howard because I can't wait to see what Howard's going to say about it. Yeah. I didn't care about the rest of his show. I mean, the lesbians were fine, but all the other characters and stuff like that actually annoyed me. I was like, just get to the news already. And him and Robin would do the news, and it was a campfire. I was in Scotland, and we were touring castles. I love Scotland. I love castles. And I was really interested to see, they had like 7 jobs at the castle, right? The guy that, protected the castle, and the guy who ruled the castle, and the cook, all these things you'd expect. But one of the 7 was storyteller. It's as old as time, because they needed a storyteller. They needed entertainment, otherwise they're going to lose their mind inside that castle, right? So we're the storytellers for the internet.
And we're in a castle right now.
Yeah, we are at Google Fortress. It was hard to get in.
So you mentioned it, like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, they all accelerate really the speed also in what news flow and get shared. Mobile devices get cheaper and cheaper and more widespread, internet access across the world. How do you see this space, this landscape of technology and news develop in the next 5 to 10 years, now that everyone has access not only to information, but also can spread the news and create actually content, and it's basically democratized? Yeah,
so I'm looking forward to how we can democratize our reporting and our hosting even more than we already do. We have this program called TYT Next, where because we do auditions from time to time. We're going to start a new show. Let's say it's an entertainment show. We bring in a ton of people like anybody would, and we go through them. But we also find people from our audience. Our second largest channel is Think Tank, and the host and executive producer of that is John Idarola. He was a kid at the University of Texas who was sending in videos to us. Like, he's pretty good. And we had him come in, work as an intern, then a producer, then a host, and then he took over one of the channels and made it the second largest channel on the network. I believe in that. I think there's a great source of talent all across the country, all across the globe. The TYT Next has struggled a little bit because lack of resources. I need curators, I need editors, I need guys. So it's not the hosting that's the issue at all. Bunch of great tapes were sent in, but we've got to have the manpower to curate all that, get it up on the air. So people are always talking about, hey, I got phones wherever I am, I could just record it. Great, I want you to do that, and they will do that, and we will air it on the Young Turks. But I need editors, I need curators, I need to have set up the infrastructure to make that happen. So just being realistic about how we're going to get there. But again, I'd rather be us than them. When you look at how to the core of your question, how is news consumed? Right now, nobody watches the primetime news. I mean, there's still 70-year-olds, and that's why they've got like 7 million people left watching those that are left over and stuff. But even my dad is 78, and I said, Dad, every night you used to come home and watch, Peter Jennings, Tom Brokaw. Why don't you do that anymore? He's like, why I watch them? I already got news online. And it's true. Why would you have them regurgitate the news you already read? So that is a hopeless model. And I was flying in this morning, and I'm sitting next to a guy, and he's in his 60s, I guess. And as people are coming onto the plane, they're like, hey, Cenk, hey, Young Turks, hey, I love the show, I watch the show. And after I don't know, however many of these guys do it, he turns around and he goes, who are you? Right? So because he doesn't know it from his perspective, but all those guys that on that plane are never going to watch, by the way, the correct answer is David Muir on ABC News, right? David Muir, who's going to watch David Muir? So nobody. The answer is nobody in 5 to 10 years. Nobody. So I think they're going to shut some stuff down. And then, by the way, I mean, I know I'm getting really inside baseball on the financials here, but if you look at CNN's financials, 1/3 of the revenue comes from advertising. 2/3 comes from the cable bundle, the subscription. And every year that goes down, for the moment being about 4% a year. It's going to speed up to about 10% a year. Now, if your 2/3 of your revenue is getting watered down like that, and you've built a giant Death Star that costs $1 gazillion, well, you can't afford that Death Star anymore. So I don't know what happens to CNN 10 years from now. I know what happens to MSNBC. That's hopeless. They're goners, okay? Fox News is in much better shape because at least they know who their audience is, and they can serve that audience. CNN is going to be drifting in space, kind of like Sandra Bullock in Gravity, like, ooh, you know, just doing circles. But at some point, I think they're going to literally have to shut down the old way they do news.
Okay. Are you looking forward to the new Star Wars movie?
Apparently. There's a lot of references.
We have 10 more minutes before we open it up to the questions of the audience. So I want you guys to start thinking about questions, and we have 2 microphones over here, 10 minutes roughly. But let's shift gears and give you a bit of context here. Like obviously, 3 weeks out from today, we have the US elections. I would argue one of the biggest elections in the world. And I would say, so actually 1 year ago, good year ago when I moved to the US, I wasn't really into politics. But I developed kind of a weird fascination, and my colleagues here can definitely approve that, for this political landscape here, how the media plays into it, the general process. So I know that definitely some of my friends are tuning in from Europe. So people who are not from the US and not familiar with this entire election process right now, and let's say the past 12 to 15 months, do you mind giving us a synopsis of what happened, like 15 months to today? And I know we have 10 minutes. And that will give us a good idea also how you basically, what the perspective of TYT is and how you basically run your show as well.
Yeah.
Take your time.
Yeah, so it's funny you say 15 months because I think right around 15 months ago, I made a bet that Donald Trump would win the Republican primary. And that's probably inappropriate, but we get to make our own rules. So, and at the time, people were like, "You're crazy, man. Of course he's not going to win. That's nuts. He's a clown, right?" But what people are missing, and what we can see because we have the outsider perspective, is people are really, really mad at the system. And so out in the country in America, they are losing their jobs. They've got no wage growth at all. And even if they hung on to their jobs, they can't get their son or their daughter the job that they used to have. And a lot of them are working at Walmart. And so they used to have a decent paying job. They don't anymore. Then they need to go on food stamps to be able to live because they're getting minimum wage. They're angry, man. And in their mind, they played by the rules. You told me to go to school, I went to school. You told me to work hard, I worked hard. And here I am at frickin' Walmart, and I got no hope. And so somebody online said this analogy, and it's true. It's like they want to throw a brick through the establishment's window. And that brick happens to take the form of Donald Trump. And their anger is misdirected. So I talk to Republicans all the time, and I think I've done a fair job of, converting a lot of Republicans into progressives. And it's because I ask them, okay, you're getting screwed by the system. I think you're right. I can prove to you how you're right. Now, who do you think did it to you? The most powerless people in the country, the Mexican immigrant that just crossed the border that has no power at all, or the most powerful people in the country? Well, come on, that's a no-brainer. You know the real answer. It's the most powerful people in the country. And they have that sense too, like, the powerful are screwing me. But the Republican Party keeps telling them, no, look away, look away. It's the Muslims. What Muslims? They're like worried about Sharia law in Oklahoma, right? it's a weird blind rage because they're mad about what's going on in their lives. So even they don't believe it's really black people's faults or Mexicans' fault or Muslims' faults. But they feel like, I gotta have somebody underneath me because I'm working at Walmart and I'm dying over here. And I gotta feel better about myself, and Trump tells me it's the Mexicans and the Muslims. Great, that's what I wanna hear. But really, what you should hear is, no, your gut was right. They did rig the system. So for example, corporate taxes used to be about 35% of all the taxes in America. It's now down to about 9%. The payroll tax, which is actually the most regressive tax, the one that not only the poor and the middle class pay, but it's capped. The rich don't even pay it after a certain amount, right? That has increased to a much larger piece of the tax pie. They shifted the tax burden from corporations onto regular people. That is one of dozens of examples I can give you. Because the Supreme Court allowed bribery. They said, oh, you can give campaign donations to politicians. You can give money to super PACs, independent expenditures. Well, that's bribery by a different name. And everybody on TV goes, no bribery, I don't see bribery, I don't see any evil, I don't hear any evil. Because where does it go? In the old days, $4 billion in an election cycle like this one goes straight into TV advertising, okay? I say old days, that's today, right? I think it's changing now because of digital advertising, so soon we'll get corrupted. You can look forward to that. But in all honesty, we have to be on the lookout for that. And you have to be aware of that. And you have to see the trends that are coming. And so in that system where they were allowed to just give money to politicians, and then of course they're going to get back whatever they want. You give somebody $1 million, they work for you. That's the reality, okay? And so I want to tell those voters that are angry out there, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, focus your anger in a way that is constructive. It's not personal. It's like Hillary Clinton is not a monster. She doesn't smell of sulfur, right? That's a theory going around. She doesn't have a body double. She doesn't have dementia. If she has dementia, why is she killing Donald Trump in the debates? I know, low bar, but still. And directing it in the right way is to fix the system. It's not to be like angry at Hillary Clinton or Jeb Bush or even Donald Trump or Mexicans or Muslims. It's to say, hey, I think maybe we could do this a better way, the way we used to do it for about 40, 50 years in this country after FDR, which is we actually have representatives representing us. It's called this crazy idea called democracy. And if we get back to democracy and free and fair elections, I think this sorts itself out. And then you'll be shocked at how much better our representatives are. In this corrupt system, what do we have? We have Hillary Clinton, which I think a lot of people would argue is the corrupted, and Donald Trump, who is the corrupter. He brags about it. He says, in the Republican primaries, he said, I bought all you guys. I paid you and you did whatever I told you to do. It's true. In New York, he paid Alan Hevesi, who later went to jail for corruption, $45,000, and he got back a $150 million tax break. If you allow that system, they're gonna do that all day long. I'd do it, right? Who wouldn't give $45,000 to get a return of $150 million? So the correct thing is, don't vote for Trump because you're mad and he's got you convinced that somebody's lower than you. Don't settle in the case of Hillary Clinton, oh, she won, I bet she'll fix things. I got bad news for you, right? So fight through activism, through new media, through all of this to get to the real change that the system needs so we can get back to democracy.
Yeah, I mean, like you're doing it like on one side with your channel, but I know you're also doing it with the Wolfpack. Mm-hmm. Can you just share? Like,
sure. So Wolfpack is a super PAC I started to defeat all other super PACs. I hear that's impossible, but I'm kind of in the impossible business. So I also heard it was impossible to beat CNN when I started in my living room. So we've been there before. And so what Wolfpack does is it acknowledges that our founding fathers were revolutionaries, which is obvious, right? And they built a revolutionary document, the Constitution. They said the revolution is this thing called amendments. So you don't have to pick up a gun like we did. You amend this document as you go along. You're supposed to. And we'll give you two ways to do it because we really, really believe in it, because we're revolutionaries, right? One way is Congress calls for an amendment, 2/3 of Congress. But they said at some point, and it's in the Federalist Papers, they say at some point Congress will get too corrupt. So we're going to give you a second option. 2/3 of the states can call for a convention specifically for an amendment. And then no matter what, 3/4 of the states have to ratify it. Now, don't get me wrong, the US Constitution is the hardest Constitution to amend. It is not an easy process. But every generation of Americans has done it. You know what was really impossible? How in the world can women get the right to vote when they don't have the right to vote? That was impossible, right? And they did it. That's the 19th Amendment. So we have a relatively easy job. About 90% of the country agrees with us that money is corrupting politics. Republicans agree, Democrats agree, Libertarians agree, everybody agrees money's corrupting politics. When we get that amendment, they will turn around and go, oh, come on, you shouldn't even get credit for that. That was so easy. That was inevitable. You had the whole country behind you, right? And so that's what our job is. We're going to go to the states, and we're going to get 2/3 of them to call for a convention. In that convention, we're going to discuss election reform. There'll be conservative ideas, liberal ideas, every kind of idea you can have. And out of that convention, we will come up with an amendment. And then we'll bring it to the states. And 3/4 of it will ratify it, and we'll fix this system. That's what we're doing.
Yeah, you, actually, I heard you saying also, like, you're happy to die poor and broke, but if you get this through, that will be like your achievement of your life. Right?
I would prefer not to. No, in all seriousness, look, sure, material comforts are great, and I'm not a hippie that's like, oh man, I can live on granola the rest of my life, right? I would rather not. I like food. But I think of the Ben Franklin test. So Benjamin Franklin was running a local paper in Philadelphia. Somebody comes up to him and offers him a lot of money to run an ad for, I think it might have literally been snake oil. and he's like, he knows it's not the right thing to do. He knows the product's bad. He says, I'm going to get back to you in a week. And for a week, he sleeps on the floor and he eats only bread and drinks only water. He comes back to him and says, no, thank you. I'm not going to take that. I could do that, right? So that's the model we use. So if it turns out I got to sleep on the floor and eat bread and drink water, but we get that amendment, I will take that in a second. And because you know why? It's not because I'm a great guy or anything like that. It's that fulfillment is a hell of a drug. And it feels so good. And if you actually give back and you actually get something accomplished that lasts for a long time and that actually helps people, it's the best feeling in the world. So that's why all the luxuries and stuff couldn't possibly compete with that feeling. I mean, I can't imagine how good it would feel to pass the 28th Amendment and actually get free and fair elections back. It'd be the best feeling in the world.
Cool. All right, so we are now 15 minutes left, and we open up the floor to questions. I see 1, 2 people already. We also have Adori, our internal questionnaire tool. So we have a few questions there.
Questions from the internet, I would have never expected.
So first I'll say thank you for coming. Second, I'll say I've sat next to Joey since he came to the U.S. And in this tornado of whatever we're going through right now. And I'm really happy he's had voices like yours to listen to, because if he's only listened to the traditional voices, he'd be as confused as the rest of us. Question kind of pertains to the earlier part of the chat where you were talking about traditional media and traditional companies. You've worked there. You know what their stock is. Do they see you coming? You know, when you think of just like the taxi companies in Chicago, you ask a lot of these drivers like they didn't see Uber coming from a mile away, and all of a sudden, boom, they're here. Do you think CNN, Fox, do they see you coming?
Mm-hmm. So that's a great question. They certainly didn't before. So some of you know the story, some of you don't. I'll do a super quick version of it. At MSNBC, I didn't follow the rules. The rules were, they literally told me to act more like the establishment. And they kept telling me hey, you got to root for the home team. I'm like, the home team's the audience. What do you mean? And they meant the Democratic Party. And so they were part of the establishment. And at some point, they got a sense, this guy's not going to play ball. He's annoying us. We're going to move him to the weekends. From 6 o'clock at night, we're going to move him to the weekends, but we're going to double his salary. Okay? And they thought, well, of course he's going to take it. 1, we doubled his salary. 2, where the hell else would he go? Because in the old days, there was nowhere to go. You couldn't, if you're on MSNBC anchor, you're not going to go to Fox News. Likely CNN won't take you. Where are you going? You're going back to Milwaukee, right? And so that's a choice that no one's ever said no to. And I did not because, again, I'm a great guy, but because I know the potential of online news in our company. And I was like, for me, that was a no-brainer. No, I'm going to go tell my audience what's actually happening. And they were like, what? Because they didn't see the audience coming. For them, they're like, oh, that was that cute little thing you did to get onto the real television. For me, television is marketing for my real audience, which is online. And so back then, it totally took them by surprise. They thought it was the craziest thing they'd ever seen. These days, it's a little different because I was at the Brooklyn debate, one of the last debates for Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, and I ran into someone in CNN's digital team. I'll leave out their names. But he said, oh, first thing we check when the comp score comes out is Young Turks. Because we're number one in half of the demos, they're number one in half the demos, and we're number two, and they're number two, on each of those. So they see us now. But those monoliths are, those giant companies are not monoliths, I should say. At CNN, there's 1 million people in the building. So some of the anchors come up and yell at me in the streets, like, I saw what you said about me, and that's not fair, right? Some of the other anchors are like, what is a computer, right? Some of the executives are like, Jesus Christ, how the hell is TYT beating us? Some of the executives are like, who are you, right? So right now it's a mix. I think at some point, as they're shuttering the windows and the doors, they're gonna be like, oh, we should have seen them coming. But they, and final thing, even like I said earlier, even if they see us coming, they can't move the ship. They are too used to making money in the old way. Like some folks in media, again, I'll leave out the names, are actually forward-thinking. Really, here I'll say ABC, more forward-thinking than the other old media, okay, much more so. But I don't know that they can move the ship either. They're like, yeah, we see the handwriting on the wall, but can't move it. Because what are they going to do? They're going to take away the prompters? I told them to take away the prompters. They're not going to take that away. Are they going to be objective rather than neutral? Neutral is he said, she said. Democrats say this, Republicans say this. I'm super safe. I didn't offend anyone, right? Objective is, yeah, Democrats say this, Republicans say that, and here's what's reality. And so they can't do it. They can't say, here's reality. These guys are wrong. On TV, you will not, like that is almost you'll get fired for saying it. Right? So they can't move the ship, and they're doomed.
Thank you.
Hi, first, thanks for coming. My question is, I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on commenting and discussion in general. So what I found really fascinating with the Young Turks is it's not just people consuming news, is they're also getting out and discussing it. And what's particularly interesting about in the digital age, you can do that. You connect people throughout the world on a same topic. And so I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on the next step of kind of engaging your audience, either from a YouTube product design standpoint of how YouTube handles comments, or maybe any other thoughts you might have on engaging your audience so they go out and look at their communities around them.
Yeah, so that's a great question because there's a particular problem there that is hard to fix. But you guys are smart, so you might be able to figure it out in a way that certainly tech-wise we couldn't. As I described, we had this wonderful symbiotic relationship with the audience. We're getting feedback from them, and they're also our editors. So I'll give you a concrete example there. Back in the 2008 election, John McCain was in some place, and they chopped up his speech in a local news outlet, and they put it up. We took it from the local news outlet, we played it, and we made commentary on it. And people that were there, because it's the internet, people were in the room when John McCain was speaking. They said, no, that's totally unfair. You guys took John McCain out of context. And so we went back and found the full tape, and it turns out the local news station had chopped it in a way that was totally unfair to John McCain. So we came back and we said, thank you guys, great job on editing. It turns out this is the full context, and we didn't know, but now we do. And so that was unfair to John McCain, and here's the reality. So that was the good old days. Today, there's still some of that, and people are amazed, but I actually scroll through the YouTube comments a decent amount. I mean, 1,600 comments per video. We do 10 videos a day on just the Young Turks, let alone all the other network shows. Obviously, I don't read them all, but I skim. Because if you listen to any one commenter and change your product based on that, you're nuts, okay? But if 80% of the commenters agree, they're probably onto something, right? And so you've got to have that umbilical cord between them. So the problem is the trolls. And so everybody knows this. And they come in and they figured out a way to be the first page in every video. So they're so obsessed, they've made a living out of this, and they're in their, they're wherever they are, and I was gonna say they're in their basement, but it's derogatory, okay. I like that I'm so liberal, I'm worried about being derogatory towards trolls. Anyway, I just want an open flow conversation, so I get something out of it, the audience gets something out of it, and the first page of every video isn't, Cenk is overweight. Okay. I don't know, can I curse? Yeah, sure, right? Yeah. No shit, Sherlock, right? Yeah, we know that. And you put that on 1,000 other videos. And the guys watching, they have eyes. They know I'm fat. Okay, so let's move. You're brown. No shit, Sherlock. All right, so that's a slight issue. I think we can get past that issue, but we got to work on that.
Another question over there.
Thanks for being here. Earlier today, you talked about the Davids and the Goliaths. So you said that the Goliaths are the CNNs and the MSNBCs of the world, and you are the David. And so I have no doubt that in the not-so-distant future, the David will overcome the Goliath. However, the great thing about digital platforms such as YouTube is that it allows any David to pop up. The barrier to entry is minimal. You just need a camera. So as you are overcoming the Goliaths, are you concerned about all of the other Davids that are popping up? And what differentiates you from the other Davids? And that's it.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. So when people ask me who's my competition, right now, that's a funny question, right? So yes, we have old media as competition, but I think that they're in such dire straits that I think that that's 5-10 years down the road, I don't think that's a real issue, and I don't think they're real competition. There's some new media folks that are working hard, and they've got their own models, but I don't think that they have the kind of campfire that we've set up. I think that they're more like, they've got a good tech solution for how to get people to watch 30-second videos on Facebook, and bless their hearts, okay? But I don't think that's a sustainable. Look, I'll give you perspective on that too. For example, Pluto is a platform that's doing really well on OTT, and it just came up out of nowhere, and so I don't know that we had high expectations for it, but all of a sudden, big revenue starting to come in. And I said, Jesus, like on YouTube, I get it, we have hundreds of millions of views. On Pluto, not so many. Why are we getting this size of check? Turns out average viewing time is 90 minutes for us, which is, unheard of in digital. 90 minutes average. So I don't think a lot of the current digital media companies are built for that. And I think in the OTT world, we're in great shape. So who's my real competition? It's a kid in Nebraska. And I don't know what his name is, and I don't know how he's going to do it. But at some point, we'll probably get Omar too. For those of you who watch The Wire, watch out for the little guys, right? They're going to Omar you at some point. Sorry. It's a good point. And so I'm fully aware that in a couple of years, maybe, we're going to be Goliath. So we got to look out for the slingshots, and don't be so cocky about your giant sword and your shields and all that. We haven't gotten there yet. We're still David. We're still, again, in the new paradigm, David is the favorite, not the underdog. And at some point, we will have a large enough size that I got to look out for all the little Davids coming out of Nebraska and Mumbai and Shanghai and all those places. But you know what? I welcome that, because our point wasn't just so that we could win and be the top company. Our point was to change the media. And if we have changed the media and they're all copying us, then the audience wins. So I'm super happy about that state of affairs if we get there.
Thank you. The time is running against us, but are we cool with one more question? Okay, one more question, and
yeah, it can be a quick one because it's actually a build on something that Lauren mentioned that you kind of built on. You talked about your business and where you see it scaling, which I thought was really fascinating. But you also mentioned like we could become Goliath, and like as long as we're delivering things in the right way, the audience wins. Like I believe that, but like when you think about kind of the pitfalls and organizational issues that have happened with large news organizations, like how do you, as a leader, stay true to your values throughout your company and continue to instill that from the top down without influencing ultimately what comes out in your news?
Yeah, you're right. It's a matter of culture. And so the culture is more being open-minded than anything else. And so our critics think that, oh, you guys are just lefties or you just have this point of view. That isn't true. We're fact-based and we believe in a range of opinion. I would have more conservatives on if I thought they were being honest. And lately with libertarians, we are finding more and more honest libertarians. So I'd like to engage them more and get them more in the conversation. But what I mean by honest is you get a Republican guy who's used to being on TV, he will hit you with talking point after talking point, some of them provided by ExxonMobil, some of them provided by the NRA. It's like, oh God, you're not a human being, you're a talking point machine. Get off my air. It's annoying, nobody is interested in that, yada, yada. But if you've got real honest conversations, so within our company, this election was trying, man. It frayed a lot of our internal relationships, because some are in the Bernie camp, some are in the Stein camp, some are in the Clinton camp, some are, hate everything that's going on and yada, yada. And we started banging heads sometimes. We're still doing it 3 weeks out from the election. And at some point, people would come and whisper to me, hey, we shouldn't let that guy do as much as he does. No, that guy, right? And no, the answer is we have got to be the forum. So we're going to put all that out there. We're going to let the audience decide. I want the strongest voices in all those different camps so that the audience can get informed, have a variety of opinion. And so it's my job to keep that culture going of open-mindedness. I think just the other day somebody convinced me on air, which in TV, when's the last time you saw someone go, oh, wait a minute, that's a good point. You're right, I changed my mind. That happens on the Young Turks all the time. It's usually me, but so the culture is open-mindedness and making sure that the audience is informed through that conversation.
I think that's a great closing remark, and please join in giving Cenk a warm Google Chicago applause for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Joey.